Have you ever questioned the existence of God? It's a deep and personal topic that often sparks heated debates. But what if the answer isn't as elusive as we think? In this video, we're going to dive into 3 powerful arguments that suggest there may indeed be a higher power behind everything we see. These aren't about proving you wrong, but rather opening up a conversation and inviting you to consider an entirely new perspective. Are you ready to explore these thought-provoking reasons? Let's get into it. When it comes to the question of whether or not God exists, it's one that almost everyone has wrestled with at some point. It's a topic that sparks debates, generates curiosity, and often leaves people looking for hard evidence that can't always be found. For many non-believers, they challenge Christians by saying, "Show me the proof and I'll believe." But here's the thing, Christians can't exactly offer physical scientific proof that God exists. But here's an important takeaway. Just because you can't physically prove the existence of something doesn't mean it isn't real. Think about it. Just because you can't see gravity doesn't mean it doesn't affect you every day, right? The same idea can apply to God's existence. So in this video, I want to share 3 simple yet powerful reasons why belief in God makes sense and why it's not just a matter of blind faith. These arguments aren't meant to win debates or to make others feel wrong, but rather to open up a conversation and invite people to think deeply about the possibility of a higher power. Now, before we dive into these arguments, a quick word of caution. We've all seen debates get out of hand, haven't we? Sometimes people jump into discussions with the sole goal of winning, tearing the other person down, or making them feel foolish. And I'm sure many of you watching this may have already thought, "I'll prove all these arguments wrong in the comments." And that's perfectly fine. I'm here for thoughtful dialogue. But if you're a Christian, I encourage you to use these arguments not to win or shut down someone, but to humble yourself. Promote real discussion and help others consider the idea that God could very well exist. At the end of the day, my aim isn't to turn this into a battle of wits, but to inspire curiosity in the hearts of those who are unsure. I've had many people tell me they just don't know where they stand on this issue, and I get that. It's okay to be unsure. My hope is that by the end of this video, you'll have 3 strong points that can help you have meaningful conversations about God's existence. Before we dive into the first argument, let me take a quick second to remind you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Every bit of support means so much, and it allows us to keep making these videos to start important conversations. Also, if you're into design, I recently created a new shirt with a logo that represents the phrase Chodozutsu, which means little by little in Japanese. It's a reminder that growth doesn't happen all at once, it's a process. If you're interested in supporting us, the link to check it out is in the description. Alright, let's get back to the video. The first argument for God's existence is what we call the creation argument, also known as the cosmological argument. This argument starts with a simple idea. Everything that begins to exist must have a cause. Now, you don't need to memorize complex premises or philosophical jargon to understand this argument. I'll break it down for you in a way you can easily use in a conversation. Let's start by looking around us. When we see a building, we don't assume it just popped up out of nowhere. We assume it had a designer and workers who built it. Likewise, paintings come from artists, dishes from chefs, and forests from seeds. Everything around us seems to have a cause, something or someone responsible for bringing it into existence. Now, if everything we see, touch, and experience has a cause, why should the universe be any different? Science tells us that the universe is constantly expanding, and if you rewind time, there had to have been a point when everything began. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how did everything come into existence? This is where the mystery lies. As much as science has uncovered about the origins of the universe, no one can say with certainty how everything began. There is no way to go back in time and observe the very first moments of creation. That's where the creation argument steps in. It suggests that since everything in the universe exists from galaxies to the stars to planets to people, there must be something or someone that caused it all to exist. The idea is simple. Everything needs a cause, and the universe itself is no exception. Some might argue, well, maybe the universe was just always here, stretching infinitely. But the reality is, the fact that the universe is expanding proves that it had to start at a particular point. The universe can't be infinite because if it were, it would have been expanding forever. So when you ask yourself, how did all of this come to be, the most logical conclusion is that a higher power or God is behind it. I know that some skeptics might say, Well, Christians are just turning a blind eye and crediting everything to God because they don't understand the science. But that's not it. For me, I don't see it as turning off my mind. It's recognizing that a power beyond time, space, and matter must be responsible for everything we see. The idea that the universe came from absolutely nothing just doesn't seem to make sense. If you don't believe in God and you're watching this, I challenge you to think about how everything came into existence. What's your explanation for the universe and life? Because every living thing, every planet, every star, they didn't just pop into existence. Something or someone had to have caused it all to be. That's the first argument for God's existence, the creation argument. When talking with others about this, simply ask them, where do you think we all came from? The universe didn't create itself, and there must be a reason for why we exist. But where did that reason come from? In this part of the video, we're going to dive into the design argument, also called the teleological argument. This is another powerful reason for why we can believe in the existence of God. The design argument is built on a simple premise complex, and intelligent design comes from an intelligent designer. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. Have you ever stopped to really think about how incredibly complex and intricate life is? Take a second to look at yourself. Your body is like a highly sophisticated machine. Within each person, there are multiple systems that work together seamlessly: the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the list goes on. It's absolutely mind-boggling how all of these systems are fine-tuned to keep us alive and functioning every single day. Let's take it a step further. The DNA inside each one of our cells is incredibly complex. According to the National Institute of General Medical Sciences, the DNA inside just one of our cells is about 6 feet long. If you uncoiled all the DNA in your body, it would stretch over 67 billion miles. That's enough to make 150,000 round trips to the moon. And this is just the DNA in one person. When I think about this, it's impossible not to marvel at the sheer design of it all. Each tiny detail, every single gene, is crafted and organized in ways that scientists are still trying to fully understand. The body is one of the most complex systems we know of, from how cells communicate with each other, to how organs coordinate with each other to make sure everything runs smoothly. It's a design that points to something greater than mere chance or randomness. The complexity of life, especially human life, seems far too detailed and intentional to have occurred by accident. Now let's shift gears a little. Imagine you were walking through a forest and you found a brand new laptop sitting there on the ground. Now it's highly unlikely that the laptop just came into being because of the forces of nature, right? You wouldn't assume that trees and rain somehow put together a working laptop through random processes. No, you'd immediately recognize that a designer had to have created it. A laptop's design is far too complex for it to have appeared on its own. In the same way the argument goes, if the universe is filled with such incredible complexity, from the fine-tuning of the human body, to the delicate balance of ecosystems, to the vastness of space itself, shouldn't we logically conclude that it too was designed by someone? The design argument says that the existence of such complex and purposeful systems is evidence of an intelligent designer. But here's the thing, some people still argue that evolution is enough to explain how all this complexity came about. And while I do believe in evolution within species, like how finches adapt to their environment, or how dogs evolve into different breeds, I don't believe evolution can explain how entirely new species like birds from fish or humans from some primordial sludge could come to be. We have no evidence that evolution can turn one kind of species into an entirely different kind of species. Here's an analogy to make this clearer. Imagine a room full of spare parts, all the components needed to make a laptop. If you left that room untouched for millions of years, would those parts eventually assemble themselves into a fully functioning laptop? Of course not. It would be impossible. The complexity of a laptop is too great for random forces to piece it together. Yet when we look at the complexity of life and the universe, some people believe that it all just happened by chance without any intelligent guidance. That to me seems less plausible than the idea that there's a creator behind it all. Let's take a closer look at the evolution of species. Take the example of Darwin's finches. While they've evolved over time to adapt to different environments, they're still finches. They haven't become something else entirely. And that's the issue with using evolution to explain how complex life forms like humans came to be. The question I often ask skeptics is this: when has life ever come from non-life? That's a major gap in the evolutionary theory, the transition from non-living matter to life. It's a mystery that science still can't solve. If life can't come from non-life in any other instance, why should we believe it could have happened by accident with humans? In fact, when I had a conversation with a chemist friend of mine, someone who works with complex chemicals every day, he made an interesting point. He explained that every chemical he creates requires specific measurements and intelligence to come together properly. If something as simple as a chemical compound requires intelligence, then how much more does something as complex as a human being? When you look at the sheer complexity of the human body or the fine-tuning of the universe itself, it seems almost impossible that this all came about without a mind behind it. But that's exactly where the design argument shines. It suggests that the complexity we see in life is not the product of random chance, but of an intelligent designer. If a chemist can't make something as small as a molecule without intelligence, how could something as complex as a human being or the entire universe come into existence without a creator? If you're a Christian, this argument can be a great conversation starter. When discussing the design of life with someone who doesn't believe in God, you might ask, where do you think all this complexity came from? How do you think life came to exist? If someone argues that evolution can explain it all, you can challenge them to think about a time when life arose from non-life, because as of now, we don't have any evidence of that happening. The most logical explanation is that life came from an intelligent mind, and I believe that intelligent mind is God. Now, I know not everyone is on board with the idea of a designer, and that's okay. But when you step back and consider the depth of life's complexity, the design argument is something that's hard to ignore. It's a compelling reason to believe that God exists. All right, we've talked about two powerful reasons to believe in God: the creation argument and the design argument. Now let's dive into the moral argument. This one might be a bit different from the first two, but it's just as compelling. The moral argument suggests that the existence of universal moral values, things like justice, kindness, and the sense of right and wrong, is evidence that God exists, because these moral laws can't have come from a purely biological world. Let me explain what I mean. Think about it. We all have an inherent sense of right and wrong. We know that things like murder, rape, and stealing are wrong. But the question is, why do we feel that way? Why do we believe that some actions are absolutely wrong, no matter who the person is or where they come from? The moral argument asks us to consider that these laws of morality, these instincts we have that tell us what's right and what's wrong, don't just appear out of nowhere. If we were simply biological creatures driven by survival instincts like animals, there wouldn't be any moral foundation for us to judge the actions of others. Lions hunt gazelles and dogs mate with other dogs without consent, and there's no moral judgment about it because it's just what animals do. But as humans, we don't think it's okay to harm others for no reason. We don't think it's okay to steal, to murder, or to cause unnecessary suffering. And when someone like Adolf Hitler commits atrocities, we universally agree that it's wrong. Why is that? Why do we all seem to know that there are some things that are just morally unacceptable? If morality was purely a biological construct, it would be subjective. In other words, what's right for me might not be right for you. It would all depend on personal preference or cultural norms. Yet we all agree on certain moral principles, like the fact that killing innocent people is wrong. So where do these objective moral values come from? How do we all, across different cultures and backgrounds, have a shared sense of right and wrong? The moral argument suggests that these moral laws didn't just arise from social contract theory or biological evolution. Instead, these laws point to a higher power, a divine being who instilled this sense of morality within us. The reason we can all agree on the basics of what's right and wrong is because God gave us this moral compass. Without God, there would be no foundation for objective morality. To put it another way, imagine a society without any universal moral standards. In that society, the concept of right and wrong would be up for debate, and it might vary from person to person. But in the real world, we all seem to have an understanding that certain actions are inherently wrong, regardless of our backgrounds. For example, you wouldn't find many people who think it's okay to murder a child, or to pollute the environment to the point where it harms innocent people. These actions are universally recognized as wrong. This shared sense of morality suggests that there's a moral lawgiver behind it all, and that for me is God. But some may ask, Well, why is it that people still do bad things, even if they know it's wrong? And that's a fair question. The reality is not everyone follows their moral compass, and we live in a broken world. But even the fact that we recognize there's a difference between good and evil, right and wrong, points to the existence of God. The very fact that we have a conscience, that inner voice that tells us when we've done something wrong, shows that there's a moral lawgiver who has shaped our understanding of morality. If you're someone who doesn't believe in God, I would challenge you to think about where your sense of right and wrong comes from. Have you ever wondered why you instinctively know that certain things are wrong, like murder or theft, even if society didn't tell you? So why do we all agree that human life has value and that there are some things that just shouldn't be done no matter what? If there's no God, where does this universal sense of morality come from? Here's the thing, if there is no God and we're simply biological creatures, we shouldn't have the kind of moral laws we do. Lions don't feel guilty for killing their prey, and wolves don't feel remorse for their actions. But as humans, we can look at something like the Holocaust, and we know deep down that what Hitler did was wrong. We don't need a law book to tell us that it's an intuitive understanding that goes beyond our biology, beyond society, and points to something bigger. Now, I want to take a moment to reflect on this. We all have that sense of right and wrong inside us. We know that what happened in Nazi Germany was evil. We know that slavery was wrong and that discrimination is unjust. But where does that come from? It seems to me that the most logical answer is that it comes from God, the one who instilled in us this moral compass that tells us the difference between right and wrong. It's not just a social construct, it's something deeper, something ingrained in our hearts. For those of you who are Christians, this argument can be a great way to engage others in conversations about God. You can ask questions like, where do you think our sense of right and wrong came from? Or, why do you think actions like murder are wrong, even if society didn't say so? These questions help people think about the source of their moral beliefs. And often it leads to the conclusion that these moral laws must come from God. Now, I want to mention that these three arguments, the creation argument, the design argument, and the moral argument, don't prove the existence of the Christian God specifically. What they do is show that belief in a higher power is reasonable. In future videos, we'll dive deeper into arguments that support the Christian God specifically. But these first three arguments provide a foundation for understanding that God could very well exist. If you're someone who doesn't believe in God, I hope these arguments make you think. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that God exists, even if we can't physically prove it in the way we might want. And if you're a Christian, I hope these arguments help you feel more confident in sharing your faith with others. Now that we've gone over the creation argument, the design argument, and the moral argument, let's take a moment to reflect on these ideas as a whole. These three arguments in their simplicity paint a picture that calls us to consider the existence of a higher power. As we explore these concepts, I want to remind you of an important point. These arguments aren't meant to be used to win debates. They're not tools to prove someone wrong or make them feel foolish for not believing in God. Instead, these arguments are meant to spark thought and ignite a deeper curiosity. They're intended to open up a dialogue where both parties can explore these ideas together in humility and respect. If you're a Christian, you've probably faced the challenge of explaining why you believe in God to someone who doesn't share your faith. Maybe you've been told that belief in God is illogical or outdated. But these arguments provide a logical and reasoned approach to defending your belief. They show that the existence of God is not just a matter of blind faith, but something that makes sense when we look at the world around us. And for those of you who aren't convinced that God exists, I encourage you to consider these arguments seriously. No one can be forced to believe in God, and belief is a deeply personal matter. But sometimes it takes a moment of honest reflection to recognize that there are reasonable explanations for why we might believe in something beyond ourselves. When I first began grappling with the question of God's existence, I wasn't sure what to believe. I was in a place where I felt the need for answers, but didn't know where to turn. The creation argument made me stop and think, if everything in the universe has a cause, why shouldn't the universe itself? If buildings need architects, paintings need artists, and machines need engineers, why wouldn't the universe need a designer? This simple question gave me a framework to begin exploring the possibility of God's existence. Then the design argument came into play. I started looking at the world with fresh eyes, the beauty of nature, the intricacy of the human body, the fine-tuning of ecosystems. It's easy to take these things for granted in our everyday lives, but when you really stop and think about how everything fits together so perfectly, it's hard not to see the evidence of intelligent design. There's no way that something as complex as the human body could have come about purely by accident. There must be a designer behind it all. Finally, the moral argument had a profound impact on my thinking. I realized that my own sense of right and wrong, the deep-seated beliefs I held about justice, kindness, and integrity, couldn't have come from just biology. There has to be a higher power that has instilled in us this understanding of morality. When I reflected on the atrocities committed by people like Hitler, I found myself asking, why do we all universally agree that what he did was wrong? The answer to that question, I believe, points to the existence of God, a moral lawgiver, who has given us the ability to discern right from wrong. But I want to be clear about something: these arguments are not meant to force anyone to believe in God. Faith is a personal journey, and no one should ever be pressured to believe something they're not ready to accept. Instead, these arguments serve as starting points, as a way to get the conversation going. They encourage us to think critically about the world around us, to ask tough questions, and to remain open to the possibility that God exists. One of the most beautiful things about the Christian faith is that it doesn't ask us to check our brains at the door. God invites us to think, to reason, and to explore the evidence for ourselves. He wants us to come to Him not out of blind obedience, but out of a willingness to search for truth. These three arguments, the creation argument, the design argument, and the moral argument, are just a few of the many ways we can come to understand that belief in God is not a leap into the unknown, but a step toward the most logical and reasonable conclusion we can reach. If you're watching this and you're not yet convinced, that's okay. I encourage you to take the time to really consider these points. Look at the world around you and ask yourself, how did all this come to be? Whether you're walking through a forest, marveling at the stars, or simply looking at the human body, take a moment to wonder, could this have happened by accident? Or is there a greater mind behind it all? And for those of you who are already believers, I encourage you to use these arguments with humility and love. When talking to others about God, the goal isn't to win the conversation. It's to invite people to consider the possibility that there is a creator who loves them and who is behind everything they see. Use these arguments to start a meaningful conversation, not to beat someone in a debate. If you approach others with kindness and respect, they'll be more likely to listen and engage in the discussion with an open heart. As we wrap up, I want to share a quick thought. Many people argue that belief in God is just a crutch, something people lean on when they don't have the answers. But I've found that belief in God actually strengthens me to face life's challenges. It gives me a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going, and a framework for understanding the world. It's not about having all the answers, but about having a relationship with a creator who gives us hope, direction, and meaning in the midst of a complex world. I hope that these arguments have given you something to think about. If you're not sure where you stand on the issue of God's existence, I encourage you to take your time and explore these ideas further. And if you're a Christian, I hope these arguments help you feel more confident in sharing your faith with others. As we come to the final part of this video, I want to revisit the big picture and leave you with some final thoughts. We've explored three powerful arguments for the existence of God: the creation argument, the design argument, and the moral argument. Each of these provides a compelling reason to believe in a higher power, and I hope that if nothing else, they've encouraged you to think more deeply about these important questions. But before we wrap up, let me be very clear about something. Faith isn't about simply collecting a set of logical proofs or intellectual arguments. At the end of the day, faith in God is about the relationship we have with Him. These arguments, while important, are just starting points. They're tools to help us think critically about God's existence. They're not meant to be the end-all, be-all of the conversation. True faith goes beyond intellectual understanding. It's about experiencing God personally and developing a relationship with Him. For many of you watching, you might find that these arguments are a great starting point to engage in a deeper conversation about the existence of God. Whether you're talking to a friend who doubts God's existence or someone who is on their own spiritual journey, these arguments can help create a space for honest reflection and respectful dialogue. But always remember, the goal isn't to win the argument. It's to introduce someone to the idea that there may be more to this world than meets the eye. You might be wondering, okay, I see the arguments, but what does this mean for me personally? If you're someone who is still unsure about the existence of God, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Faith is a journey, and it's okay to take your time to explore it. Don't feel pressured to rush to conclusions instead. Look at your life and your experiences. Have you ever felt that deep inner longing for purpose? Have you ever experienced moments of awe where you just knew that something greater than yourself was at work in the world? For me, I've found that when I reflect on the creation argument, it gives me a deeper sense of peace. Knowing that the universe didn't just randomly pop into existence but was created with intention and purpose gives me a sense of order in a sometimes chaotic world. When I consider the design argument, I'm struck by the complexity of life. The human body, the natural world, all of it speaks to me of a creator who cares deeply about the details. And when I think about the moral argument, I realize that my sense of right and wrong isn't just a social construct, but something deeply embedded in me, a moral compass that points to something much greater than myself. But I also know that not everyone experiences the world in the same way. And that's okay. These arguments don't force anyone into believing in God. They simply offer food for thought. They offer an opportunity to explore, to question, and to engage with the world in a new way. If you're someone who doesn't believe in God, I encourage you to keep asking those hard questions. Seek out the truth wherever it may lead you. I believe that the search for truth, wherever it takes us, is always worthwhile. For those of you who are Christians, I want to leave you with a word of encouragement. These arguments are great tools to help you defend your faith, but remember, it's not just about proving someone wrong or winning a debate. It's about showing others the love and grace that God has shown you. When you have these conversations, approach them with humility and respect. Ask questions that invite others into the conversation. And when you talk about God, let your words reflect His love, not just your desire to be right. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of a debate, but I've found that the most powerful way to win someone over is through kindness and understanding. Just as God has shown us mercy, we should be quick to show it to others. If you're using these arguments in a conversation, remember that the goal isn't to win the person over, but to open their heart to the possibility that God exists and that He loves them. So be patient and be loving, and trust that God will work in their hearts in His own time. As we close this video, I want to encourage you to think about your own journey. Maybe you've been a Christian for years, and these arguments have reaffirmed your faith. Or maybe you've been skeptical, and today has sparked something new in you. Wherever you are on your journey, know that God is with you. He's always been there, even in your doubts, your questions, and your search for truth. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions, but always be open to the possibility that God is bigger than we can fully comprehend. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching and for being a part of this conversation. If this video has made an impact on you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any future videos where we'll continue to explore important questions about faith, life, and purpose. And if you feel led, consider sharing this video with someone who might need to hear it. As always, I'm praying that this video has blessed you and that you'll continue to explore these arguments and questions in a way that leads you to a deeper understanding of God and His love for you. Whether you're a believer or still searching, know that you are loved and that God is waiting with open arms for you to discover the truth about Him. Thanks for watching. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video. As we wrap up, I hope these 3 powerful arguments have sparked something in you, whether it's a new perspective or a deeper understanding of God's existence. The beauty of life, the complexity of our world, and the undeniable sense of right and wrong all point to a Creator who loves us. If this video made you think or helped you see things in a new light, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps us reach more people with the message of truth and love. Thanks so much for being a part of this journey. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.